All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our OMUG meeting and presentations today. I'm Garth Appanidis with DKS Associates. I'm part of the OMUG coordinating committee along with Kyle Hauger with Metro and Liming Wang over at PSU. And together, the three of us, along with Carol's guidance and expertise, help plan and coordinate upcoming opportunities. And so I'll provide a reminder again, but if you have ideas for future presentations, please feel free to reach out to us. All right, if you can go to the next slide, Carol. So a quick overview of our agenda. We've got a lot to cover today. We're going to start up first with some lightning talks. This is a new element we're going to be trying. So in addition to our regular, more substantive presentations on a variety of topics, we'll start off with a couple quick hits from Miguel Figliozzi and Liming Wang. And then we have a few technical presentations on a variety of topics, all having to do with data analysis and modeling in some way or another, though they might not be what you might think of traditional travel demand modeling or microsimulation modeling, which I think is what comes to mind for a lot of folks, but equally important and very interesting topics. And then we'll close off with some announcements at the end. So I know, let's go to the next slide, Carol. Or excuse me, I know Miguel needs to run soon, so we'll start with him. Miguel, are you ready?
Yes, I am. As I can share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. I guess it's my first time giving this lightning talk, and I'll try to keep it in 5-7 minutes as that was the request. So today I'm going to be talking very briefly about an SPR project A46, and specifically about the task 7 is the safety analysis. And because the focus today was related to safety, I thought it would be a good idea to share this. So this is just related to the task related to the safety analysis. This is a joint work with also OSU, but PSU was focusing on the safety part. And the research coordinator for this project is Josh Roll, that you guys all know, and it's going to be presenting later. So if you have more questions, he can also be helping fill in some details. So very quickly, I'll go to the kind of key question we're trying to answer. There are several definitions for commercial vehicles. One from the Federal, Motor Carrier Safety Administration is like vehicles that has gross combination weight of 10,000 pounds or more. And the other thing that is kind of important in this very short introduction is that CDL, commercial licenses are only required for vehicles that are greater than 26,000 pounds. So one of the concerns, especially with the growth of e-commerce and the growth of mid-size kind of deliveries and vehicles, is that what is going on with this kind of in-between vehicles that do not require to have a CDL, but they are kind of increasingly showing up in our streets and roads. So the key idea is really, can we study safety trends? And that's what I'm going to try to give you some insights. The first thing is the data sources. I assume most of you know there is at the state level, there is a CDS, the crash database system that transportation data section put together. And, it's a very comprehensive database, but unfortunately, it's not very good in terms of providing details for the type of vehicles that are involved, especially the commercial vehicles. So one goal of this project was to kind of try to get another database from the Commercial Motor Vehicle Department at ODOT that it's somewhat similar, but it's different in the sense like they are recording commercial vehicle crashes, but the IDs are different and the whole system is different. And one of the key things we were trying to see if we could merge and put together these two different databases. And Josh also, had the good idea of trying to also get VIN data because the CMV, the commercial vehicle department gets information about the VIN. So then we could also use that to try to get more information. So that was a great insight. And we also added place type, looking at the geography based on, some data source that the ODOT put together, trying to see if we could see some trends in terms of land use and crashes, commercial vehicle crashes. Just to give you a sense, this is one slide in terms of looking at overall trends. So we have here the years from 2007 to 2021, and why I'm not showing 22 or 23, just because we're limited in terms of the number of years we had available in terms of data. And then you see the percent of total crashes, and there are 4 different sources that we are comparing. The first one is every vehicle in the state. You see that's kind of the blue line, and that's kind of percentage overall in this time period. Then within the CDS, what is the total for commercial vehicles and how that is trending. And you see that how it's kind of, moving in terms of very close to, if we get from the ODOT crash database, just the vehicles that are over 26,000 pounds. And you see that, the green and the orange, they perfectly, they have a very, very, very high correlation. So they're almost, going together. But the other thing that we could get from joining the databases was being able to separate, commercial vehicles between 6 and 26,000 pounds. And you see there that, maybe at the beginning, you see like in 2009, there is a dip and it goes down, commercial activity. So there is less crashes. And then you see that it's not really tracking it, with the other two. And obviously, we see the dip in 2019, but then we see a huge increase in 2020 and 21. And unfortunately, we don't know what happened after that because we don't have more data. Hopefully, we can continue this in the future. But, the idea here is that we can see that there is some disconnect between crashes of these lighter vehicles, commercial vehicles, and the heavy vehicles that are, the traditional kind of where we focus on most of the time. The other thing we did, and just I'm going to share, this is just, for example, looking at the crash database using vehicle type 4, that's the typical, tractor trailer you might see on the interstates. And this is type 4. And you see here when we are kind of looking using the location of the crashes in terms of where they are taking place in terms of percentage of total crashes, you see that urban interstate and urban principal arterials and rural interstates have the highest percentages, and this is for like semi-trucks. That's where traditionally we have seen the focus. But if we look at delivery vehicles, and this is one of the great things in terms of merging the databases, is that we're able to narrow down the focus to not just commercial vehicles for a given weight, but we could also, in some cases, there is a company that is registered with the motor carriers. And in this case, we're looking just at FedEx and UPS commercial vehicles. And you see that when we narrow that to those two companies, we see that, very different picture in terms of urban arterials and minor arterials. That's where we see most of the crashes. So you see that it's a already very different trend and picture when we narrow the scope. So just in this very quick summary, we have a lot of other material, but I have been showing kind of the good outcomes, but just to kind of give you some heads up, this is not free of complications and problems, because the databases are not sharing an ID or even standards. So we have a very complicated, filtering coding we have to do to merge databases, and we lost roughly 50% of the records, in that process, just because there is no way to match using the same ID. So we have to use time and location and, a lot of, it's very complicated. But just to tell you that that's one of the downsides, that you ended up losing quite a bit of records. But still, I think that's one of the good things, is that the trends in terms of severity by road type, I didn't show by land use, but we also see trends that make sense. And like I show at the end, also by company, we also can see that, the results make sense, even though we have some loss in the data. And finally, what is missing is we cannot get yet crash rates, because we don't know the VMT for this type of vehicle. So we're able to disaggregate now in a more like granular way, but still we don't have that granularity for VMT. So we cannot get like crashes per mile traveled, for example. So I guess with that, I cover my time, maybe a bit more. So I don't want to abuse. I don't know if there is time for a quick question or not.
I think we've got. Oh, no, we should probably keep on moving. Looking at the time, we're at 10:13. Want to be sure we give time for Liming. But Miguel, thank you very much for presenting that first lightning talk. That was a lot of information, and I know I've got a couple of questions I'll be following up with you on. But thank you very much for that presentation.
And Josh too. You can with both of us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Liming, are you ready to go?
Yep. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, both Carlos and Miguel. So this is totally by coincidence that both the lightning talks are from PSU folks. This is not strictly planned. So we are always looking for volunteers to do lightning talks in the future OMUG sessions. I do hope this is useful, and you either coming to talk about a brief talk about what you have been working on that may be of interest to other in the modeling community, or share a tip. This is exactly what I'm doing here. I want to share some tips of doing functional programming in R with a package called PER. And of course, I will not be able to do it justice in about 5 minutes. So I will give you some resources to hopefully I can pique your interest, and then give you some resources to learn more in the end. Okay. So I believe for those R users among you, you probably at least came across S-apply, L-apply, and a bunch of other apply functions. I frankly have never been able to remember what to use and how to use them. So this actually PER package is an effort by Hallie Wickham and his colleagues trying to create a consistent interface for basically all those apply functions in there. How it works is it takes the elements in a list vector in the first argument of a map function, and then call a function f on each element of the list or vector. So a very dumb example on the right there, we are basically doing a square on each number in the list of 1, 2, 3. Of course, no surprise, it will give us 149. And then you can also course the return to be a number, then you get a vector as output. I will give you maybe 2 examples of how I use it. Now, some of them are in this one here is a actual real kind of task I've been used PER for. So without PER, what I'm doing here is trying to read a data from CSV file that's distributed in a number of different directories. And then in base R, you will basically have to initialize a list, and then read each file, append the results to the list, and then in the end, combine them, okay? So, and if you use per, at least in my perspective, this is a lot more clear. You basically have a one-liner. Of course, it will be a long line, but you take the file, find by list file, and then call read.csv, and then in the end, map_dfr will combine them into one single data frame. A second one, it's a bit kind of a made up example here, is that I have a list of formula, and then I want to basically feed a model, use the same data set, using each formula, right? I can, of course, the other way can work too. If you have a data set, but you want to feed the same formula on different subset of the data, for example, that works too. So I have formula and then call a map on a function or function there. Of course, again, very made up example, probably not very interesting. And then you can call a summary on each of those. So another benefit is that you basically have the parallelization coming almost free, okay? So just pretty much the same code as before, but if you load the fur function and then append a future underscore to map function, now, and of course, add a plain and multi-session and specify how many workers you want, you have parallelization without any additional work. Okay, it works on multiple different platforms and so on. Okay, as promised, those are the where you can learn about more. Of course, the per package is probably a good place to start. Hallie Weekend has a talk there. And then if you want a link, you can find my slides here. Of course, it will be on the OMUG website. And with that, I'll close. And certainly looking forward to have you give a lightning talk in the future. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Liming, and thank you for putting the plug in for future lightning talks. On these, in the future, we'll be targeting, looking if we have short presentations, something you want to present on, or something that you'd like to suggest, please let us know. We don't have time for Q&A during the lightning sessions, but if you can go ahead, if you have any questions related to those, go ahead and add those in the chat box. And Liming, or I know Miguel Figliosi had to run, but Josh is here and may be able to cover for him on some of those questions. So let's go ahead and make use of the chat functionality to try to get some Q&A for those. All right. So next up, we have a few longer technical presentations, and we will have some Q&A set aside for those. First up, we've got Lake Mitai with Metro. Lake is the principal transportation planner at Metro, working primarily in the areas of street design, transportation safety, and active transportation. Lake is managing Metro's Safe Streets for All project with funding from US DOT, working with jurisdictional partners and communities to develop strategies and actions to reduce deaths and serious injuries from traffic crashes in the region. And the first presentation is going to be on analysis for Metro's Vision Zero plan. So Lake, you want to take it away?
I will take it away. Yes, thank you so much for the invitation to speak today. I trust you can see my slides.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Let me just actually, hold on one second. I cannot see my presenting slides. There we go. Okay. So yeah, really happy to be here. This is a little less on the technical side and more on sort of giving you a flavor of Metro's Safe Streets for All program. And I've been working at Metro for about 19 years and focusing on safety for about 8 of those years. And so my goal today is just to give you a sense of the work that we're doing, some of the data and analysis that we do. And I think it is valuable for modeling. I'll touch at the very end on some goals we have for crash prediction models, macro models at the regional level. There's so much I could cover and go into. So this is really just to give a snapshot, a kind of a high level, and then hopefully pique your interest and give you sort of ideas of where to look for future information. It's nice to see quite a bit of people that I know and some new names as well. So looking forward to meeting those of you in the future that I don't know. So this is, to start, I'm going to give kind of a timeline of regional transportation safety planning. And then I'll touch on some of these elements in a little bit more depth. So Metro really started to focus in on transportation safety in a very detailed and focused way in around 2010, so about 14 years ago. This was working with the federal government, who wanted to see a regional transportation safety plan developed. And so we did some analysis, created our first state of safety report, looking at fatal and serious crashes primarily in the metro region, developed a regional transportation safety plan in 2012. It was not adopted at that time, but it really started to lay the groundwork of where we wanted to go. And at that point, we identified a 50% reduction target for serious crashes in the region. After that, we developed an active transportation plan, which really took a very strong focus on safety and looking at how to improve safety for people walking and biking and accessing transit in the region, and developed some bike and ped policies with a real focus on safety. In 2016, looking forward to the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan, we developed our first high injury corridors. And these I will talk about in a minute, but this is sort of the beginning of our regional transportation planning process focused on safety. In 2018, we did adopt the first regional transportation safety strategy, and I will talk a little bit more about that, with a Vision Zero target of 0 deaths and serious injuries by 2035. And that was, we developed the first regional safety policies, we developed objectives, actions to try to get to Vision Zero by 2035, convened an interagency safety working group to develop all of that. And that is where we first started to talk about and adopt the safe systems approach, which is a very effective approach for addressing safety, and I'll touch more on that. Coming right on the heels of the 2018 Regional Transportation Safety Strategy, we developed street design guidelines, which are outcomes-based street design guidelines with, again, a focus on 0 deaths and fatalities. So what types of street changes could achieve that? We also were really starting to emphasize safety outcomes in our regional flexible fund allocations and getting specific criteria, linking up that criteria with our high injury corridors and with our street design guidelines to identify projects that could help reduce serious crashes. We started to work on providing equity and safety forums, looking at provided a forum in 2020 on the safe systems approach, committing to providing regular safety updates to our Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, the Metro Council. So really making sure that safety is highlighted at these high-level transportation committees and at the Metro Council, both as sort of a single agenda item, but also elevating safety throughout all of the transportation discussions. And then in 2023, we again updated our high injury corridors. which I'll talk about. And we applied for the Safe Streets for All grant, which is giving us some funding to really begin to standardize and enhance our safety data and analysis over the next couple years. It's a great opportunity to really focus in on safety. So this is just a snapshot of kind of the timeline of safety at the regional level at Metro. So safety planning, this is mandated by the federal government. And I think I just want to highlight this because it is baked into all of the metropolitan planning organization work that we do at Metro. And there's sort of a baseline, and Metro, we've really attempted to go quite beyond that baseline and are working closely with FHWA and ODOT and other partners to really enhance everything that we're doing around safety to in the effort to have better outcomes. So we do need to include safety as part of our transportation planning. And we need to consider like what types of projects and strategies are going to increase safety for all modes, including drivers, people walking, bicycling, riding motorcycles, etc. And then we need to show in our Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, the MTIP, how those investments that we've planned for are actually advancing towards our performance targets. At another level, advancing our safety goals of reducing serious injury crashes is very integrated and important to supporting advancing other goals at the regional level. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions, advancing equity, minimizing environmental damage, and increasing active transportation. These things are all so interrelated, and so we see reducing serious crashes as a key element of achieving these other outcomes and not in conflict with any of them. So the Regional Transportation Safety Strategy, the first adopted safety strategy for the region, one of the first safety strategies of any metropolitan area in the country, was adopted by the Metro Council in 2035. And really importantly, we moved away from the 50% reduction of serious crashes to a Vision Zero target. And that is an ambitious target, but places that have adopted these targets have really shown that they've been able to make great advances in reducing serious crashes when they have these ambitious targets paired with the safe systems approach or other very approaches that are very focused on reducing overall harm. This plan is a topical plan of the Regional Transportation Plan, so it does inform, it's part of the Regional Transportation Plan, and it has been used in the last 2 RTPs to inform the types of projects and programs that are being brought into the plan. Overall, the policy direction for the Greater Portland area, which is defined in the Regional Transportation Plan, is that Vision Zero target to use the safe system approach. And that is very much focused on lowering speeds and increasing safety for all users. To prioritize safety and transportation projects. Obviously, all projects should be safe, but this is to focus in on prioritizing projects that will reduce existing crashes and prevent them from happening in the future. Tying safety to equity to reduce the disproportionate impact on Black people and Native American people, other people of color, people with low income. And to really focus in on immediate interventions, not just waiting for very large, expensive projects to occur. And then making sure that safety is a key consideration with defining system adequacy or deficiency. so that we are not degrading safety and that we are actually moving in the other direction and improving safety. So the safe system approach is a foundational framework that is adopted in our regional plans and that we are using to help define all of our actions, our communications, how we are moving forward with safety in the region. And we're using this approach because it has been proven to be very effective in places where it is implemented. Partially, it's because it's embedded in a set of principles where death and serious injury are unacceptable. It acknowledges that humans make mistakes, that humans are vulnerable to crashes, that responsibility is shared and safety is proactive, and that redundancy is crucial. And that's looking at these kind of layers of safety, of safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and then post-crash care, so that when one part of the system fails, there's another part of the system to prevent serious injury from occurring. Another framework that we're incorporating is the upstream public health approach. And this, again, we're using this framework because it is proven to work when you take a systemic approach towards safety rather than focusing on individual action. You get better overall results. And so it's creating that upstream healthy transportation system, which is proactive to prevent serious crashes from occurring in the first place. And then if a crash does occur, it is not serious because the speeds are slow, because there's enough buffer. There's various interventions. So this upstream public health approach, which is focused on equity, when paired with the safe systems, has been, again, proven to drastically reduce serious crashes where it's been applied. So one of Metro's primary roles is tracking our performance around safety. So this is just a snapshot from one of our safety performance reports. Unfortunately, we have been moving in the wrong direction. Now, we do have very ambitious targets. Each of our annual targets, so here the annual target for 2021 is shown in the middle column. Those were established when we adopted our 2035 Vision Zero targets. So we adopted targets for every year moving forward to 2035 using a S-curve analysis to identify what types of targets do we need to be meeting each year in order to get to zero by 2035. Serious bike crashes are the only target that we've been moving in the right direction. But for these 5 federal performance measures, we are moving in the wrong direction in number of fatalities, fatality rates per VMT. We're also moving in the wrong direction in fatality rates per capita, which is not shown here, and then for non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So this is another kind of core function of Metros. These are the high injury corridors that I identified earlier in the timeline. And we first identified these in 2016. We updated them in 2023. We update a policy map every 5 years as part of the regional transportation plan, and that's used to help us prioritize projects and funding through the regional transportation plan and through the regional flexible fund allocations. These are the roadways. Just 6% of roadway miles in the region where 68% of traffic deaths and serious injuries are occurring. So this type of analysis helps us. It's just one way of understanding serious injury crashes, but it helps us zero in on those roads where we could make the biggest difference. They're usually the most complicated roads, typically urban arterials, a lot of VMT, a lot of users, a lot of different movements, but they're also where we need to be focusing our attention if we're going to make a dent in serious injury crashes. 76% of pedestrian crashes, for example, occur on these roadways and also within equity focus areas. So to start to get at that, in this last regional transportation plan, we developed a safe and healthy urban arterials brief. And this was really to get into, you know, what are some of the challenges preventing us from fully investing in these major urban arterials and addressing safety in a way that would start to turn our trends around and move us in the right direction. And so this brief identifies some of those challenges and some potential opportunities, some of which were implemented in the regional transportation plan. This slide is really giving us, we start to look at how are we addressing safety in the regional transportation plan. We don't have a regional crash prediction model, so we can't actually say this is how many crashes we're going to prevent in the future. But what we do is we have developed a definition of a safety project, and we count the number of projects that are in the plan, whether or not they're on a high entry corridor, the level of investment for these types of projects. And that gives us at least a sense of, are we devoting enough resources to safety specifically to address serious injury crashes? All right, I see I'm way behind time here, so I'm going to speed it up, even though I'm already talking kind of fast. So street design guidelines, we've developed these to help us support our safety goals. Check them out. There's very focused on safe streets and safe people. We have this grant that is now underway. We've got a 2-year project. The focus is really to understand the challenges, using data and analysis to engage and coordinate with our regional partners and communities, and to focus on solutions more than anything in terms of understanding what needs to be done, how can we better coordinate and get on the same page to move the needle forward. We are creating sets of local high injury corridors and high injury intersections, including for bike and ped, and those are going to be available soon. This is just another way to understand where these serious crashes are occurring at different geographies. We'll be supporting city and county safety action plans. We've got some sub-recipients of our grant, Tigard, Washington County, and East Multnomah County. And then we're also working with other agencies that are either updating or developing safety action plans, focusing on best practices and data and analysis, et cetera. We'll be doing in-depth pedestrian and speed-related crash analysis, and this is really just to try to better understand what factors are contributing to these types of crashes, speed-related and pedestrian, and then using some different analysis approaches like a RCVE, working with partners to narrow in on solutions and strategies, because really we do know a lot of the strategies that work, but it's getting to that shared agreement that these are the key strategies that we all need to be coordinating on. We're also going to be developing a safety hub where it's kind of a one-stop shop to go to get data analysis. We want to really be able to make our data and analysis easily and widely accessible to the public and to our agency partners, so the data can be quickly downloaded, that it's easily updated on a regular basis. We want to have strategies, countermeasures, videos, toolkits. We're working on all of this over the next 2 years to really, again, have that shared common strategy that we're all moving forward on. So, and then on the horizon is looking at a macro level crash prediction model. This is going to help us set, different types of targets within the regional transportation plan. It's going to help us estimate the necessary type of safety investments, give some more and better information to decision makers to understand if they are making the right decisions around safety projects and programs in the regional transportation plan, and then understand the impacts of projects on safety. And then I'll end with just some strategic considerations moving forward for our regional safety program. Metro is really around leading with safety policy. We want to be a major resource for data and analysis for our partners. We don't own or operate the transportation system. So our role is that convening, providing information, helping to coordinate. There's a lot of efforts underway, legislation, funding, coalition building that intersects with safety. And our ideal is to make sure that safety is woven throughout. And again, there's a shared idea of what the problem is and what the solutions are. And that while there's agreement among agencies and advocates and decision makers that safety is really important and we need to do more, there is less agreement about what to do and how to do it. And that's one of our focuses over the next 2 years, is to try to get to, all decision makers saying, yeah, managing speeds for safety and lowering speeds in urban environments is really critical to safety. Achieving safety outcomes may take decades, we know that, and we're benefiting from decisions made decades ago. So as old challenges are addressed, new challenges come up, right? In-car safety has really improved, but now we have taller vehicles that are contributing to pedestrian deaths. And then success is contingent on many factors. And a big factor is that agreement on a strategy among a diversity of leaders. So I will end there, and appreciate that was a bit of a whirlwind, but I just wanted to give everyone a taste of our regional safety program, and hopefully pique your interest and give you some breadcrumbs to follow up on. We've got a lot of very interesting data and analysis. I didn't go into depth because usually those things take a fair amount of, consideration to really understand, see and delve into it. So starting there, happy to always come back and, just give you a snapshot of a particular data area. So thank you very much for your attention and time.
Well, Lake, thank you very much. That's very interesting. And I know there's questions. In fact, Alex was quick to get his hand up. Looks like we got about 7 minutes. So Alex, go ahead.
Yep, you got to be quick on the draw. So I really appreciate the kind of the honesty in the metrics that you displayed between the 2015 and the 2021. I think it's great to be ambitious and to show just kind of clearly where we're headed. So my question, which might sound like, why isn't Metro doing this? But I don't think anyone is doing this. So it's not really, it's not a knock on Metro, just kind of a curiosity if it's been discussed. As you showed that slide, as you were showing the trend, which I think most regions are on, where things are not looking better, they're looking worse. I was curious what in that time period, that 2015 to 2021, Metro has invested in. So I'm curious if there's like a list of, these are the things that have been kind of attempted. Also, this is also politically like probably a non-starter, but I'm curious, what are the ideas that, Metro would have liked, what's on the wish list of things that they would have done in that time period, but potentially laws or agencies are standing in their way. I think it'd be good to kind of start that, like, I don't know. I think it'd be good to put different agencies on notice that, these are things that we'd like to do, but, for a variety of reasons, we're being blocked from accomplishing these, and we believe they're contributing to this trajectory that we're on. Anyways, I'm just curious if anything like that had come up. Yeah, I really like a lot of what you're talking about was kind of looking forward, which I think is really important. But I like that monitoring piece and just kind of, assessing what have we attempted and why are we, what do we think is blocking us?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Those are very important questions. And yes, we have done that to a certain extent. I will post a couple links. So we did a progress report on our safety strategy in 2021 that did I did interviews with all the different agencies working on safety and kind of looked at the actions that we had identified in the safety strategy and how much progress we had made on them. So I'll put a link to that. And then I just gave a safety update report, which I'll also provide a link. It was a report to JPAC and the Metro Council specifically because they are the entities that are responsible and accountable at the agency at the regional level. And it was looking at, kind of what's been done and what more do we need to do. And I will say one of the challenges with both reporting on performance measures and then looking at what's done in transportation at the regional level is this sort of time lag, right? So we're reporting on 2021 performance and some of our projects that we funded, you know, we allocated funding to in 2015 are just now starting. So there's like this weird kind of lag time. And so it can be challenging to sort of say, are we doing the things that are giving us the right outcomes? The city of Portland, you know, just finished the Division Street project, all the safety improvements around Division Street and FX. And, you know, they still haven't been able to give like a full accounting of the safety outcomes with that, even though there's like this kind of demand for it. And so it takes a little while to assess. And really, you can look back to the 70s and just now start to see certain trends coming, right? So it can take a while to really understand what types of influences are happening. We can learn from other places. So just a quick example, blood alcohol content level. Some European countries, they have drink driving. You cannot drink at all, right? They have 0 blood alcohol content level. Utah went down to 0.05. And they think there is a very positive impact from that. So that to change the blood alcohol content level in Oregon has been attempted several times from 0.008 to 0.005. And it keeps failing or just not even moving forward at all. But that could be something, like that's the type of thing that could have a good impact if we can move forward with it. But we need that kind of shared strategy and agreement among decision makers, like, yeah, this is an important thing. And is it the most important thing to focus on? At the legislature, it's actually quite hard to get any time dedicated fully to safety. There's other things that are taking precedent that do impact safety. Housing impacts roadway safety, drug use and health services impacts roadway safety. All those things do contribute, but I'll provide a couple links, but measuring kind of what's working and demonstrating that using case studies is critical for decision makers to kind of be convinced that they should be dedicating some of their time to these things. And I do think that a crash prediction model will help us with that, because the models that I've started to look at that are just in their infancy for a macro level regional planning model does look at other factors, you know, everything from age and other different demographics, education level, incomes, all those things contribute to safety. And so you can actually be addressing roadway safety by, you know, focusing on some of these other things. So it's a very nuanced, so I could just talk about, I'd love to have like an hour-long conversation on this, but I'll stop because I know you guys are very busy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lake. And Josh, I know you've been sitting there patiently. I think in the interest of time, we got to move on to Alex's presentation. But Josh, if you could put your question in the chat, and I have one that I'll add to, Lake. But thank you very much for the very informative and interesting presentation. All right. And I would encourage also, if others have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat as well. Next, we have Alex Bettinardi with TPAL giving a presentation on safety analysis in the MMM framework. Apparently, apparently Alex likes his little chocolate candies. Alex has worked in the Oregon Department of Transportation's Transportation and Planning Analysis Unit for 19 years. He's a registered professional engineer in the state of Oregon and received his bachelor's degree and master's degree in transportation from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Alex represents Oregon on the National Activity Sim Partnership and is leading Oregon's shift to the next generation of travel forecasting models. Alex, excited to have you take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Garth. And the slides are coming across, I assume? Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so I wanted to bring a little update about, like in the intro, our efforts moving to the next generation of travel demand models, activity-based models, and specifically the metrics conversations we've been having and how we're, and then dialing into the safety metrics specifically. So I'm going to talk about how we're going to improve safety in travel demand models, or how we're hoping to. just to be clear, I don't think it takes, it would replace the need for the macro level crash prediction models that Lake was referencing. So I still think those have a lot of importance and value. Anyway, so this isn't an attempt to replace that, just working to get all of our models better and doing a better job around safety. So with that, sorry, I'll just get my slides. There we go. So just an overview. I kind of said it quickly there, but I want to talk about where we're headed with our travel demand, the state's travel demand models, a little bit about the metrics conversation that we've been having alongside those models, specifically diving into the safety conversation, and then kind of just, you know, next steps and where we're headed with that. So on the ABM side, around 2021, 2022, you know, I'd say, so the state has had, so this is OMUG and we're underneath the OMSC. So most people probably know about the OMSC and the great history in Oregon about collaborating around model development. So the state has had this great history. You know, back in the 90s, there was an effort to put our trip-based models that most of the state is using. You know, we had a joint estimation there where we pooled a bunch of survey data, and most of the trip-based models that we're using across the state are, you know, still benefiting from that original collaboration. Since the 90s, we've had two major surveys. One is currently just wrapping up to do a statewide level travel survey data collection, which from my understanding is unique across the country and the world, having this a common a survey across the state like this. I mean, there's the National Household Survey, but at a state level, it's unique in Oregon. So for the second time, well, third, depending on how you want to count it, that effort underneath the OMSC is wrapping up. And before 2022, you know, we were a variety of model developing agencies in Oregon. I think we're kind of on their own tracks for the next, you know, set of tools, you know, trip-based or activity-based models. And in 2022, underneath the OMSC, we came together and, you know, using the survey that's coming up, all agreed to work towards a common joint estimation with this statewide, the statewide survey. So in 2022, moving forward to collaborate on a common model estimation. In 2024, we'll be getting the survey data that is key. You know, the only way we're able to develop these models is understanding at the core of for how people are traveling, the why, what, when, where, how, of why they're making travel decisions. So, so that survey data will be delivered in 2024. Alongside that survey data, we've been finalizing the design for our next generation of travel demand models. So that'll be wrapped up in this next month. And the new tool has a GitHub environment. It's called S'more. So we've got s'mores out there for everyone on GitHub. And so then after the survey data is developed, we'll be filling our S'more code repository with our joint estimation through 2024, 2025, and then 2026, 2027, each of the 6 MPO modeling regions across the state of Oregon will be getting calibrated, finalized, specific ABMs from this joint estimation finalized in their region for the next planning efforts. And then past 2027, we'll live in a utopian world with the best generation of travel demand models on the planet, along with all the new information that they provide. So that's what's coming up. Everyone can just hold their horses till 2027. We'll be in a brand new environment. So that's what's happening on the travel demand model side. Alongside that, thanks to the urging and the, you know, I think the brilliance of Peter Hurley, we were planning on doing a metrics conversation. The way I had it timelined out was going to be after the AVM was developed, we were going to figure out how to pull metrics out of this. And Peter Hurley really pushed the conversation to advance it, to ensure that we were having a metrics conversation at the same time that we were in development. And so last year, with that correct advice, that smart advice, we launched the MMM conversation, which is really a metrics conversation, but it does go with s'mores, I learned. So we didn't figure this out at the time, but we have now with s'mores, and on the population side, we have popcorn. So we have a really good series of snacks being developed here. So and it's very funny too. Anyways, so in 2023 we kicked off and we framed that underneath the recently at the time launched Oregon Transportation Plan, the OTP, and in that Oregon Transportation Plan, 6 key goal areas were identified for the state, 3 of which being kind of the top tier elements driving transportation decisions moving forward. And so those are safety, equity, climate, safety number 1. And then additionally, you know, just as important, but not quite as much, mobility, economic and community vitality, and the stewardship of our public resources, basically preservation, maintaining what we have, and finding a way to fund it. So we started this metrics conversation with those 6 specific discussion areas. So we developed groups of experts in each topic area, each of these 6 topic areas, and we had dedicated conversations, a series of 3, which each of the 6 groups, to kind of talk through from a selfish modeling perspective, what would it mean to get better information out of our models in each of these categories. And the way we've drawn it here, which is not an OTP product, you know, equity kind of covers everything. We really, I would say we really focused on the 4 areas within that equity bubble: mobility, safety, climate, economic vitality. The stewardship of public resources is, we had conversations around that, but it's, at least in the current conversations, it's really off model. So it's important, but a little bit aside. And equity was not its own conversation, although we did talk with the equity section and experts in the agency about how to best integrate it. But we really tried to talk about equity across all metrics. It was not its own conversation. It was embedded in all of our conversations. So I think then my next slide is jumping into safety. So what did that mean? So each of those had their own conversation, but what did it mean specifically for safety? So one of the key performance metrics coming out of the OTP, the Oregon Transportation Plan, similar to metros, but maybe not quite as comprehensive, is to simply eliminate fatalities and serious injuries. So, you know, so that's a key piece of information that the state somehow has to figure out, you know, how it's going to deliver successfully. And so, you know, so that was one key element guiding our metrics conversation, is how do we provide information towards that key metric. And then similarly here, we've got from the OTP the goal of safety, of enabling safe travel for all people, regardless of their age, ability, race, income, mode of transportation. And then I won't read them all, but you know, there's 3 objectives underneath that goal as well. And so we're using all of this from the Oregon Transportation Plan to kind of guide the conversation around, okay, what does that mean for our travel demand models? How can we help achieve that in some way? So I've got kind of this procedural pause slide in a couple of places. So procedural pause here. Throughout this conversation, you know, our travel demand models have been around since, I don't know, what, a long time, many decades, 50s or 60s or something. I don't know. So we've had them a long time. And I don't know how everyone on this call feels, but I would say safety metrics is not their strong point. You know, I think Metro is doing some things around MCE to get some safety elements there, but basically they've never really been built around providing safety information. And so as we've been moving forward through this conversation, you know, I think we're trying to do as best as we can, but I think we're also checking back in on, you know, what's the scope of a travel demand model, and just trying to do our best, but stay within scope. And I know personally, I wouldn't be able to really draw that line of what's in and what's out, but just noting that there's this continual check back about, you know, wanting to do our best for all the metrics, including safety, but also trying to just make sure that we're not, you know, totally in a totally, you know, that we're still about travel demand modeling, and which includes safety, but not driven totally by safety. So just calling that out. So given that kind of what the OTP was laying out, and also kind of, well, what is in scope for a travel demand model? So what can we do? And so the conversation focused in on, you know, at the core of it, the most important thing for the travel demand model to do is to represent and forecast exposure. So like the travel demand model is really good at or you know, theoretically can be made to be really good at both validating to the existing year, but then also forecasting up for future years in different scenarios, different project scenarios, where autos are going to be, where transit vehicles are going to be, where freight is going to be, where biking and walking, where they're all going to be. And so having that forecasted travel information about where are people trying to travel, what segments are they on, what roadways are they on, what is their exposure risk, that's where the model is can respond, can speak to, and that's where we want to beef it up and make it as good as possible. So I have there, so to best support safety, we need to do our best work representing travelers on the correct facilities in the correct amounts. So it kind of is as simple as that, but there's a couple of other but alsos, and so but also while we're working on ensuring that people are in the right place, part of that is better the model is better representing and better reacting to the quality of the system. So again, as I said it, I don't think travel demand models have been super strong in safety metrics. I would argue that they haven't been super strong in representing the quality of active options, like so the routes that people have, and not just the fact that they have an option to bike here like on the sidewalk, but that they have a quality option, or the difference between a sidewalk and a bike boulevard, or a 6-foot bike lane has a barrier of some kind. Luckily, even prior to this metrics conversation, the group has been aware of this, and so our upcoming new and amazing best of the best travel demand, our travel survey has a lot of questions around understanding attitude towards biking, as well as understanding what people are willing to accept from a risk and what kind of comfort they expect. So all of these questions and more to possibly come. There's some conversations about having additional follow-on surveys to get even deeper into some of these areas. But basically, we're going to have a wealth of data in the travel survey, which is the key to having a travel model. You can't have a travel model without the survey. So we'll have the information now to do what we have never been able to do and really build in this quality understanding into our models. So again, Utopia in 2027. So that's one element. So understanding exposure, where the risk is, getting quality right. The other thing the safety conversation brought out is that things like predicting safety, and if you're going to do it through the highway safety manual is super data hungry. And so you need a ton of context layers about what the land looks like, about what the asset, like the inventory of the street roadway network. I have like here, like lighting, even signal operation, distance to school. Like you need just this ton of contextual information. And so in the conversation, we agreed that the travel model network that we use, for the purposes within the scope of travel modeling is never going to have all of that data. Like there's no reason to repeat and try and maintain on a living basis all of that information on the travel demand model network. So that's not the travel demand model's problem to solve. So what our attempt is going to be moving forward with this model series is to do a good job predicting where the people are at, and then having a linkage to the asset information and to the spatial layers so that we can move our information about where people are predicted to be onto the data layers that have all of the information, and we can help do improved safety prediction with that tight linkage. So it's basically a data join. We have, like on ODOT's side, we'll have our linkages, our linear referencing methods to get from our model networks to our 82nd Avenue. Well, 82nd Avenue at the right mile points, and we'll move the data over, and we'll get all the asset information and just join it all up, and it'll be nice and pretty. That's the plan. So just an important distinction, though, the model networks are not responsible for retaining all this. They're just responsible for being able to join to these data sets. So that's all safety stuff, but just kind of what the conversation with all the metrics categories also helped highlight is that just moving to the ABM from the trip-based does a world of benefit for all of our metrics, not specifically unique to safety, but also that benefit safety. And so in the conversation, as we talked with all these groups, it was highlighted that, the ABM's power is really in the ability to understand an individual, at the agent level, individual travelers, the specific characteristics of those travelers, the motivations of those travelers, and the specific routes that those travelers are on. And so it's just something that a trip-based model would never be able to do. And so, you know, again, across all of our metrics, but also with safety, you know, having that detailed look. I mean, the way I like to think about an ABM is basically a travel survey expander and forecaster. So you're basically creating a brand new travel survey, like we've spent $6 million to collect in 2023, 2024, and you can now synthesize and make that 100% and also grow it into the future under future conditions. So you have this amazing wealth of information about how people are traveling under different conditions. And that just is something that will greatly allow us to answer metrics in a totally different way. So I got a variety of elements there on the screen, but at the bottom there, like having the travel stress that a given individual faced on a given bike or walk is something that could be tagged at the individual level that couldn't be done at a trip-based model, and then aggregated through for people of different neighborhoods or different races or of different income levels or whatever you wanted to do. So again, just like endless kind of possibilities there. Okay, so just another procedural pause. So those are all the things that I think are possible and within the realm, but there are definitely challenges up ahead, and so you know, I think there's still this scope discussion about how far can we push the ABM to do the job that we would like it to do on the safety side, and so some things that we're up against here. So current shortfalls. So got 3 of them, probably more, but at least 3 of them. So if you really want like exposure data, you know, ideally it's comprehensive and you know all the people that are out there. And so our travel models currently are focused on residents typically, and they don't usually have special markets like how are visitors traveling. You know, some usually university students are not fully represented the way they should be, and other special groups. And so, you know, to really capture how many people are out there biking or how many people are walking along that road, you need to have all travelers, all users of the system. And so that's one place where it's unclear about how well are we going to be able to get that done. But for safety, we should really have all travelers. For safety, especially for active modes, we really need all trips too. And you would think, well, a travel model has all trips, doesn't it? Well, no, it doesn't. There's trips that are taken off and not deemed as like, you know, travel. And those are typically loop trips. And so things like leaving your house and riding a 4-mile loop on your bike to get exercise and then returning to your house with never making a stop, you just had 4 miles of exposure, but that trip isn't counted in the travel demand model. And so, you know, biking and walking, a lot of that travel, you know, walking the dog, you know, could indeed show up in loop trips. I don't know how much we've ever spent time investigating. I'm not aware of a lot of time in prior investigating that. At least with this travel survey, we're going to have a lot of detail about loop trips. You know, so I think we can pontificate about how much of the percentage of bike and walk trips loop trips are. But, you know, with this survey, we should have a really good idea for what the percentage is. And my guess would be it's pretty significant, maybe not half, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 25, 30% of BMT or something like that. So anyways, it's unclear about how and if we'll be able to get loop trips into the system, but to really represent exposure, you know, we would need to properly represent loop trips. And so that's not clear if it's in scope just yet. And the last thing is models, you know, you have no comfort or no confidence in a model if you don't QC it against observed behavior. So we've always had a history of doing this pretty well against autos. We have a lot of count data. We can run our travel models through and check us against vehicle count data. But we've historically been pretty bad when it comes to bike and walk count data. And so we're going to do the best job we can. You know, I'm committed to trying to do the best job that we can to scrape together the bike and ped data that we can for this estimation, this calibration effort underneath that estimation, and to try and be as confident as possible that our model is predicting where people are biking and walking as well as we can get it. Because if we're not doing that well, then the exposure data is up. So from a safety perspective, we need to do a really good job ensuring that biking and walking is happening on the right links. And again, it's kind of like this discussion of is that in scope or not. So a lot of challenges, but we're going to try. And so pretty committed to hitting that utopia, going to get to the top. I love climbing mountains, and I'm usually stupid enough where I keep going until I get to the top, even if it's not safe. So we're going to make it to the top here, and I'm happy to take any questions if there's time.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Yes, we've got about 9 minutes or so for questions. So if you have any, please go ahead and raise your hand. Alex, I've got one. I'll start off with. You mentioned, that rather than doing some of these safety analysis or predictions within the travel model, the travel model, the purpose of the travel model is really coming up with those forecasts, and that analysis would be done elsewhere or live elsewhere. Do you have a sense for what type of software or what type of framework ODOT might use in the future to combine those data sets or do that type of analysis?
I mean, I guess I'm trying to think. So, I mean, I guess my stumbling shows that there's no there's no specific software that the way I've been thinking about up to this point is just simply to get the data onto the same, into the same table, and then to be able to do, table crunches and tabulations onto that. I'm sure there's a lot of software that could help support that and make it that much easier. But at this point, I'm not aware of we're moving forward to moving it into, paid software X. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's my simple way to answer the question. I mean, basically, step one is get the data in the same place. Once the data is in the same place, I think there's, that's the goal. And then there's a variety of software I think that you could do cool stuff with.
All right, great. Other questions? I'm not seeing any hands.
Well, my email's there. Please hit me with any questions, and hopefully we'll all see each other in Utopia in 2027.
All right. Well, thank you, Alex, for the very thorough presentation that quashed any questions people may have had. If you do come up with a question, again, please go ahead and put it in the chat. And if you haven't been monitoring the chat, I know there were several for Lake, and she has been fiercely providing all kinds of responses and resources to those. So be sure you don't miss those. All right. And then next up, to cover pedestrian safety and social equity in Oregon, we have Josh Roll. Josh Roll is the Active and Sustainable Transportation and Research Coordinator for the Oregon Department of Transportation, where he coordinates and conducts research. Josh has experience in most elements of the analysis process, starting with data collection and wrangling, data processing and cleaning, visualization and data exploration, and finally model system development and application. Josh believes that better quantifying the costs and benefits of each of our travel options will help decision makers better prioritize investments that will mitigate the effects of inequality, reduce our carbon emissions, and improve public health. All right. Thank you, Josh, and go ahead, take it away. No, I'm not hearing you.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Hey, I don't know. Zoom's been giving me trouble last couple months, so I'm not sure what the deal is. So sorry about that. Can you see my screen okay?
Screen looks fantastic.
Great, thanks. So many great presentations on safety, and I'm very happy to be here and present on some of the material me and Nathan McNeil from Portland State University put together a few years ago now, a little bit dated, updated a few of the graphics with data that we have that we didn't have back when we did this report, just some of the new crash data. But excited to be here because I know as a doing travel modeling and land use forecasting at Central Lane many years ago, safety was just like not on my radar. And honestly, at the time, felt like having no experience in safety analysis, that like, I think safety guys, girls, they got this all figured out. Like we know what we're doing. That was at the time of like 2013, 2012, when fatal and serious injuries were really almost at the lowest point in decades in Oregon and the rest of the country. So feeling like, oh, I think we got this figured out. Since 2014, we've started to see a continuous increase in fatal and serious injuries across the country and here in Oregon. And I don't know if we have it all figured out. And I think as we chart a course forward and try and do some of what, for instance, Lake was talking about and refocusing ourselves around a safe systems approach, I think we're getting closer to trying to figure out where the interventions are going to best be targeted. But like travel demand modeling or like travel forecasting and travel behavior, it's a really complex system of inputs and factors. And so just hopping in, we carved out and did some work on a small piece of safety, looking at pedestrian safety and its relationship with income and race and sort of this equity picture. So talk about the research objectives, go through a little of a high level conceptual model of the inputs to crash safety, go through all the findings, and there's a lot of them, but I'll breeze through them. There's a couple resources that folks can look at to dig in. And then to put a spin on this, that maybe to help it be a little more relevant for some of the modelers in the room, talk a little bit about where I see some of what we've learned in this work, but then just more generally, what kinds of tools we can keep pushing on towards development. Things like the MCE, things like the MMM that Alex mentioned, that we can try to integrate with our travel model work so that we can talk about safety and the outcomes into the future and what we're going to be getting for our investment. So I'll try and touch on that here at the end. But this research project started in 2020. And the genesis of this was when we had a researcher from Rutgers University come and talk to the Oregon Transportation Commission and the similarly governing body of Oregon Health Authority. Met with those leadership groups and talked about the intersection of transportation and health, but then also the intersection of transportation, health, and equity. That researcher shared some findings from New Jersey where they highlighted disparities in pedestrian traffic injuries across the state. And that got a question to our office about like, oh, is this a similar, what's the picture look like for pedestrian injury inequity in Oregon? And so that kicked off the process for our office to like scale up a research project that was one that we did in-house in partnership with Portland State. And the questions were really, what does this picture look like? What are pedestrian injury disparities? Like, does it exist in the same way as it is in the New Jersey work that we saw? Have these changed over time? And we had a specific ask because we were working on our transportation safety action plan. Like, could we write something up and include it in there to address pedestrian injury and inequity? And then I mentioned today, I want to talk a little bit about how some of the work that we've done may have some implications for what we do on the travel modeling side. But we're going to focus on race, income today to a certain extent because it's often ignored when we're talking about safety because we a lot of times don't have the data at our fingertips. But I don't want to gloss over the fact that crash outcomes are super complex and there's never just one factor. This conceptual model we designed to help tell this story, right? That travel activity and human behavior, how much you drive, where you drive, what times of day do you drive? Are you driving impaired? Are you driving distracted? Those types of travel behavior and travel activity inputs are important for predicting crash outcomes. Vehicle design, another one. One of the biggest benefits in reducing, or one of the interventions that's reduced fatals for vehicle occupants over time has been the addition of seat belts, collapsible steering columns, frontal crumple zones. That was not a standard thing in the 1950s and 60s, and a lot of advocates did a lot of work to make sure those safety features are now standard in our cars. The issue now, and we just documented some work for our vulnerable road users assessment last summer, and presented at TRB is the role of vehicle design and influencing the severity of pedestrian injury crashes, and that taller vehicles, for instance, are increasing the odds that in the event of a collision, the pedestrian will be killed. And so there's been some trade-offs with vehicle design in the recent years. And then road design and operation, the way we design our roads, the way they operate. Lake mentioned the speeds being a big component and a core tenet now of the safe systems approach. These matter. I emphasize the road design and operation because we presented a lot of this work to a lot of transportation authorities. We get to decide what the road looks like. We're designing and operates like. I think there was some mention of Lake about just demonstrating what our projects are delivering in terms of safety. We know a lot about road design and operation and its influence on safety. Alex mentioned the Highway Safety Manual. I mean, that is ensconcing a lot of these relationships in road design and operation and safety outcomes. And that's been out since 2010, although a lot of that science has been out for even longer. But a lot of this research has been ensconced in resources like the Crash Modification Database that Federal Highways runs, where you can go and you can look up a given treatment and see how many studies have been done on that given treatment and what the expected crash reduction is when we make those road design and operational changes. So we know a lot about this and we know that it matters, but all these things come together to help influence, which direction our overall crash injuries are going to go. Okay, so what's the picture looking like for pedestrian injuries? So here's a chart showing fatal and serious, and then serious by themselves over time. And we're seeing a consistent rise, especially since the early 2010s, in pedestrian injury outcomes. And currently in Oregon, about 8% of our fatal and serious injuries are pedestrian involved. And we don't travel 8% of our miles by walking. And so this is a pretty clear overrepresentation. We took a shot at trying to show that overrepresentation using our travel survey, our last one from 2010, and creating some crash rates. And you can see here for motor vehicle, bike, ped, and motorcycle, the differences in per mile crash rate outcomes. Other research has demonstrated similar findings that pedestrians are overrepresented in our crash data when you consider how much we travel by foot. So though there's overrepresentation of pedestrians in our crash data, within the pedestrian crashes, we also see differences among racial and ethnicity. So we don't collect that data on race and ethnicity in our ODOT crash data, but we do collect it in our fatal accident reporting system data, the FARS data. Taking those data, comparing them with census, doing some age adjustments, which is the proper way to compare a health outcome or like a crash outcome compared to the population. We highlight in this work that people of color are most times overrepresented in our fatal injury data compared to the state average. We looked at this over time. This is a chart I updated recently because FARS 2022 just came out. They are changing. Some groups, there's a little less disparity, like for people that are categorized as Asian, but American Indian, Alaska Natives have increased. Black and African American classification are decreasing, but overall BIPOC people are still overrepresented in our fatal pedestrian injury data. This is all about pedestrians. We took another look at trying to evaluate disparity by categorizing all 800 or so census tracts based on the percentage of the population that is living under the poverty line or classified as people of color. Looking at, and then we categorized all the census tracts and then created crash rates by for all of those different categories, sort of like a social equity index or a social vulnerability index. ODOT has its own index now. We didn't have that available at the time, but it's very similar. We just use race and income here instead of some of those other population characteristics. And what we showed was that, in census tracts categorized as high concentration of people living in poverty, people of color, we have a much higher rate of injury. So that blue bar represents about 1 million Oregonians, 25% of the population, but where 40% of the fatal and serious injuries occur, versus those census tracts categorized as lowest. So a lot less or a lot lower percentage of people living in poverty, and people of color, a much lower rate of injury. This is kind of what that looks like spatially, those census tracts defined by low to high, just so people kind of understand what that chart represents. One of the questions we had in the research project was, are things changing over time? Things are changing over time. We showed that in these two periods, the rate of increase for those moderate and high concentration of low-income people census tracts were increasing at a higher rate than the average and the low groups. It's kind of leveled off. I didn't put the chart in here, but it's kind of leveled off in the last, in terms of the rate of increase, although the disparities still exist, but it's sort of leveled off in the last 5 years of data. So then the question was like, why do these disparities exist? And the two pathways that we documented include people in these census tracts walking and taking transit more, and that the built environment in these census tracts is less hospitable for people to walk and to take transit and access transit. We highlighted this exposure piece by looking at the percentage of the households in those census tracts that have that don't own a vehicle, that are commuting to work by bike, walk, and transit based on the census data, and then also pulling in some other data around like transit stop density. We did look at the travel survey information, highlighting and summarizing, you know, per capita miles of walking and transit by poverty designation and racial categorization, all pointing to the same story, that low-income people are walking and taking transit more, and thus are likely to be more exposed to vehicle traffic. Walking and taking transit more in an environment that's likely, you know, deficient of sidewalks, or more likely to be deficient in sidewalks, fewer crossings, and in an environment where there's much more high-speed arterial traffic. And we used that, and we showed that using some of the Oregon data, and then also gleaning from some past research. Another analytic approach we took was what's called kind of an ecological analysis, where you take all these census tracts and we estimate a statistical model to try to tease out and control for different confounders. That's summarized here. Median income in terms of social demographic information was a major predictor of where pedestrian injuries were occurring across the state. So the higher the income, the lower the probability or odds of an injury occurring in that census tract. But again, these other built environmental features that we had access to across the state, we wish we had things like sidewalk completeness and some other things, but we just don't have that yet. But the climate friendly and equitable communities multimodal inventory process is going to give that to us. We'll have a lot better intelligence in time. But what we found is the more VMT on arterials in a census tract, the more likely crashes for pedestrians are going to occur there. Arterial lane width, transit stop density, you know, alcohol establishment density, those types of things all correlated with more pedestrian injuries. We have and each of these analytic tasks are written up in our final report, which we'll have a link to at the end. And I just want to focus on what I think is the primary driver in these socio-demographic bits, which is the income. And this just shows sort of a sensitivity analysis of looking at what the expected number of pedestrian injuries at the census tract level looks like based on the income of the census tract. And you just see here pretty clearly how how many fewer pedestrian injuries are expected when the income, all else being equal, those built environmental factors and whatnot, all else being equal, how many more injuries you would expect based on the income. And again, the income here, I think, is a proxy for some travel behavior information that we just don't have access to, the amount of walking they're doing, the likelihood of taking transit. So a bunch of different analyses that we did in this work, sort of just documented here using a bunch of different data sets. We were asked by our director's office to look at this as in many ways as possible. And we did that using FARS data, our own crash data. We used EMS data to try to tell the story about how far people are being injured from their homes. There's a whole chapter on that, because there was a question about, like, are these tourists that are getting hit in low income neighborhoods, or, you know, like, what's the situation there? So lots of data, lots of analysis. A lot of these analyses are up on GitHub, so you can repeat things or take a look at what we did and how we did it. We also tried to wrap the story of safety outcomes in the bigger picture of disparities across other outcomes that have been pretty well documented in things like the public health literature around disparities in exposure to air pollution. Lower income people more likely living near freeways and arterials where the air pollution is going to be higher. There's a long history of that. It's helped inform some of the NEPA work that we have to do on an ongoing basis. Also trying to ensconce the safety outcomes around these disparities in access to healthcare, to jobs, to healthy food. And there's a whole document that was written trying to describe all these other outcomes and that are transportation related, and that's all featured in the lit review for this work. Okay, so switching a little now to what should we be considering as modelers for trying to account for these disparities in injuries, and also forecasting safety generally in the work that we do, because as was mentioned a couple times earlier, like it's just not been a part of what we're focused on producing information for. It's about travel times, it's about where the traffic's going to occur. Those sorts of things are traditional ways that we use outputs from our models. So how do we do a better job at telling the story about what the suite of projects and policies that we're putting in place through our RTPs or our long-range plans, what that's going to get us? And it's already been mentioned, so thanks for that, Lake, the NCHRP 1781. This project, this NCHRP project looked at using these zonal models, similar to that ecological model that I talked about for pedestrian injury, doing that for all modes, and using outputs from the travel model to inform forecasts for safety into the future using a zonal structure. So not getting down to the nitty gritty, safety performance network level type of analysis, although I think that's where we should go over time. But now this NCHRP project complete, highlighting that, this is an acceptable way to try to forecast safety into the future. And hopefully something that with our trip-based models we can start doing now. We have all the data. There's no new methods that need to be designed. There's no new data that we need. We can always refine the methods, but right now we could do this, and we could talk about by 2035 or 45 now, whatever our forecast horizon is, like what we're going to expect for safety outcomes given what we know now about the system and the way it operates. And then the last thing I just want to put on people's radar is the need for us to, I think, do a better job with our travel models and telling the story of who benefits and who pays when a given project is being considered. So right now, we're struggling with how we tell this story for equity around what a project is giving us. In terms of benefits to the communities of concern or low income groups or however we're classifying that. Right now, a lot of jurisdictions across the country have developed social equity indices, social vulnerability indices, whatever you want to call them. ODOT has one. And the approach we're kind of taking is like, hey, is this project like going through an area where we have a high concentration of these communities of concern? Okay, it's benefiting them. But that's and that's a first step at trying to address this and try to link equity with some of our project planning and selection, but it's incomplete because we don't know, just because a project's in a zone that has these populations doesn't necessarily mean it's benefiting them. In fact, some freeway projects could provide disamenity to those populations. And so what we do now, though, right, is looking at, and this, just backing up a second, this table comes from a tool that was developed by the Cutter at University of South Florida, where they try to, I think, lay out a few more of the parameters that we should be considering when we're thinking about how our projects are impacting different groups of people. And I highlight here what we kind of do now. Like, is this project in one of these communities where there's concentrations of these populations? That's a good first step. There's no problem with that necessarily. But again, it's incomplete, and we need to start finding ways to answer, this is my opinion, these other questions. Does this project increase access to healthcare? Does it reduce, does it improve affordability? And so I offer this as just a framework for us to think about how we might build processes to extract some of the information from our travel models, because I think there's a role to play in our travel models for informing some of the questions in this chart. So just offer that for consideration here. lots of things out there that we produced. There's a lot of literature within this work that is good to reference as well. We're certainly not the first to develop some of the methods and approaches. So for folks interested in learning more, some links here for that. And then just want to recognize again Nathan McNeil from Portland State, who had a heavy hand in shaping this work and helping it helping ODOT get it all written up. So happy to stop there and take any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Josh. Any questions from the group?
I have one if no one else is going to pop in, but I'll give people maybe another minute if they want to jump in before I take the floor.
It's all you, Alex.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, if I can ask you a question quickly, is the metrics, the measures that Josh referenced at the end in terms of what we would hope to be able to understand in the future, is there work that TPOW is doing with ActivitySim or any other sort of agent-based models that would be able to extract these questions?
Well, yeah, so great question. That was kind of where I was going to ask Josh too. So, so I guess my question is a little bit of, well, so I think I haven't read through each exactly one in detail, but I do think our models are getting better and better at answering these, and I think our activity-based models will be that much better than our current ones. So I don't know if I could say with a straight face that each one of these is possible, but I think a lot of them would be. I'd have to read through each one and kind of give my each answer for each one. But Josh, what I was curious, you were mentioning current models or trip-based models. And I agree, our trip-based models can be used to pull a lot of this stuff too. What I was wanting to pick your brain on a little bit related to Sylvan's question is, I guess my main fear with the trip-based models, or any model, it's not really an ABM or trip-based, but any model that hasn't been given the time to really ensure that it's doing a good job with active modes and predicting where the active modes are traveling. So if a given model has only been focused on auto modes and doing a good job on knowing where auto modes are traveling, that's where I get nervous in trying to reach too far with these questions. So I guess partially my answer to Sylvan is it's not so much the functionality of the model as it was how was it constructed and what was the purpose when it was being constructed. So I don't know, Josh, do you feel like maybe this list better? Is it just auto? Is just auto travel enough, or do you need to know active modes? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Right. For this list, I don't think I've thought enough about it. And the way, I think there's different ways to get at like the mobility piece here, right? Does it improve or expand bike and pedestrian facilities? Does that mean access to the facilities? Does that actually mean generating more pedestrian miles traveled, bike miles traveled? Because if it does, and our models don't account for that activity very well, then we probably shouldn't try to deploy the model to do that, right? But I don't know. I don't think we have to answer every one of these questions, right, and do that to the gnat's eyelash. I just think that these are pieces that we should try to aim for in some way, and then also maybe helps inform some of the ABM development. Now, in terms of the trip-based models for the zonal safety analysis, I think we're good. I think, yeah, we're not representing biking and walking, but what we showed in the ecological analysis was that VMT and income of those zones were good predictors of pedestrian injury outcomes. We can forecast that at the network level into the future right now. Talk about what the income is at that zonal level, put in what other information we have that we'll be able to forecast out reliably, and then give us some sense for how, given all the projects and everything else that's happening in our programs and policies, what we're going to expect for safety outcomes. Because we just, coming from a forecasting background and doing more safety analysis over the last 5 or 6, 7 years, it's pretty remarkable. We don't have a sense of how to meet those Vision Zero targets like we do, say, for greenhouse gases, right? We didn't have that intelligence and that model system for greenhouse gases before Brian Greger and all the work that's followed that, right? He built that tool so that we could say with, you know, some confidence what all these policies and programs and interventions are going to do for greenhouse gas emissions. Because right now, what happens is you get different stakeholders that come to the table and say, well, it's alcohol involvement. That's the problem. That's what we got to focus on. Or, hey, it's vehicle design. Or, hey, it's phones, right? It's all, you know, everyone's right. It's all of those things, but we have no way to sort of like pull on different intervention levers and see just like what it's going to take to get to that target of 0.
Yeah, great answer. A lot of hope for this non-utopia before 2027. I like it, Josh.
Josh,
Question.
Go ahead, Ray.
This might be for Josh, or it might be for all the panelists. So there's discussion about exposure rates being calculated, and that's one way of predicting crashes in the future. But as we saw in 2020 through about 2022, with the VMT going down, the death rate and injuries went up. So that would see contra to the exposure rate. So question is, how do any of these models or discussions take into account the facts that, you know, what we get from COVID or events where we have people who are higher risk takers or whoever's left driving are increasing the injuries, when we think that we've done a number of modifications, and we would expect from the models from CMF and all that the numbers would be lower. And the second question is, you know, backcasting, going back and throwing back the models or the exposures, going back and seeing, does it actually replicate what happened in the past?
Mm-hmm. Well, 2020, 2021, and now 2022, we just got data, is in some ways showing a consistent story in terms of the relationship with outcomes and crashes, but then it is also kind of perplexing. So it's hard to see here because of the scale, but for serious injuries and other injuries, they went way down in 2020. Fatals, the opposite direction. And one of the first times I think we've seen the departure of those two injury severities in that way. And I don't think we have a firm understanding of really what's going on. There's a lot of theories about what happened in 2020 and 2021 about more speeding. You know, yeah, VMT went down. And so what did that produce? Maybe open roads, especially in evening times. We had a serious loss in enforcement across the state for a variety of reasons. And so I don't think the relationship between crash outcomes and exposure decoupled. I think the rate of injury per mile just increased. And you can kind of see that when you do that comparison, especially in 2021 and 2022.
So, but do the crash modification factors, if they're all built on a certain assumption of a level of enforcement and various other things, and if all that goes away, do those factors still apply? And do they need to be recalibrated for the new reality, and how long that lasts? So before people make a whole lot of investments in certain projects that they assume will do something, you know, it seems like some of these models might be better. And we need to rethink whether these are still pertinent in the new reality, because as you know, as everyone sort of knows, looking at some of the screens, you know, our telework has gone way up, and that's blown up certain transit forecasts and project forecasts. And so replicating that sort of thinking and redoing for a crash also seems what we need to do.
Totally. I agree. We should be continuously updating those types of tools to understand, you know, how travel behavior is changing the relationship. Another thing, vehicle design, right? You get a whole slew of new types of vehicles. That's going to change what the likelihood of higher severity injuries could be. One way or the other. You know, it could improve things for occupants, but it may degrade things for non-motorists. I mean, if I had my druthers, we would have, and I think this is some of the utopia that Alex dreams of. We have a high quality routable network data set. It has all of the relevant assets appended to it. So for bikes and peds, where the bike lanes are, where the crossings are, where the sidewalks are, we're updating that on a pretty regular basis, maybe every 2 years. And that we're continuously, we're developing forecasts or at least estimates of pedestrian and bike volumes along with our other user types, and that we can continuously monitor things in a more rigorous way than I think one-off studies where, you know, some researcher will look at one intersection type, one intervention, and, you know, figure out what the predicted crashes are and what the potential benefits are of a given treatment. Like, we could do this on a much easier basis if we had a better way of maintaining our asset inventory data across the state, at least in the urban areas.
And also a second question for Josh. On your environmental, whatever, ecological analysis slide, it was showing, you showed that that roads marked as 45-mile-an-hour, and I'm assuming higher, or is it just 45, is showing a decrease in pedestrian injury. Is that associated with less people walking on there or better sidewalks?
Right. This is the problem with having incomplete exposure data, is it makes these models somewhat hard to interpret. There's also the issue of taking network data and representing it at a zonal level. You know, we try to account for area size, and do density measures. It improved the models enough where we kept it in, even though it did have this opposite effect. And I can't say if it's because we didn't have sidewalk data, if maybe we have more sidewalks on roads marked 45 miles an hour or higher, or like you said, like maybe fewer people are walking in those conditions, and so it leads to this. And so kind of tricky. I mean, to interpret some of these. I will say we're working now on building a safety performance function for PEDs. We're in the process of developing high quality, very disaggregate level data at the link, like building on OSM, compiling sidewalk data. We got some of that from you guys recently, Ray. Putting in high quality information about transit usage. We have speed data, either posted speed or RIDIS data. Doing that at a really disaggregate level to understand this in a little more, without, you know, some of these issues that come from the ecological or zonal modeling approach, to hopefully suss some of this out in more detail.
Good, thanks.
I'll put a teaser of the data in the chat here.
All right. We have a few more minutes if there's any other questions for Josh. Josh, I was curious on the zonal analysis that you mentioned, which again is, you know, completely free from some of the challenges of the network and characteristics and travel path selection on networks. But for the zonal analysis perspective, you mentioned that there's some methods and tools that we could be probably using now along with some of our travel demand models. Can you talk a little more? Have you tested, I mean, is this kind of, it could work from a theoretical practice, or have you tested it out on some of the models, done any piloting or case studies on that?
No, we haven't. There was discussion, and maybe Alex can remind me of where it left. I think in relation to the MMM work, his which is called something else now. Sorry, Alex. Is that the SMORE? Is that SMORE now? Which I love. Where we're looking at these options for forecasting safety, and looked at that NCHRP 1781 as a way to do that. I did a quick comparison because we have all the zonal data, at least at the tract level. We may want to re-estimate using our TAZs and see how, especially for the smaller TAZs, things work out. But we did some comparisons with the tract level in Oregon and compared just a side by side with some of the parameter estimates from that NCHRP, and they look pretty similar. The units were slightly different, so it was just like a quick look. but they're actually pretty simple models in the NCHRP work that I think we could even expand on. We have to just take a look at what we have in our travel model space year and forecast year so that we have everything we need for both ends of the estimation or the application. But I think it's there. Like, we could do this. The data are available. The methods are documented now in this, NCHRP work. So I think it's more acceptable to go this route. And I'd love to see us move forward on it.
Great. Thanks a lot. Okay, any last call for any final questions? Otherwise, Carol, let's cover the announcements and closing items. All right. So looking ahead to well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all the presenters today. Lots of very informative presentations around the broad topic of safety, but lots of very interesting opportunities with the various data that we're doing, that we're using, some of the different research that's out there, and then thinking about how we can put some of this into practice to help inform some of the strategies and the trends as well going forward, and working towards that overall Vision Zero goal. So looking ahead over the rest of the year and some of the upcoming topical areas for the OMUG group. In summer, there's a few different topics there, looking at speed curve analysis, pedestrian actuator data for modeling, and data fusion. And then further out into the fall, there's a couple different sessions we're starting to put together. Have some ideas for those, and some of the work that's still ongoing, but work related to vision eval, and then also performance measures, standards, and mobility policies. So again, I think as Li-Ming mentioned earlier, either if you have ideas for topical areas for presentations, or maybe even just a suggestion, something you'd like to touch on or see someone else touch on as part of one of these lightning presentations, that would be great to hear in the future as well. All right. Upcoming conferences. Here's a few that are noted in the coming months. Is there any from the group? Are there any other conferences that you'd like to note that maybe aren't listed here? All right. So thank you, everyone, for your attendance today, the great questions and discussion, and to all our presenters for the work they put into the very, very interesting presentations, and then all the Q&A responses as well. Again, to catch all that information, including the slides, please feel free to visit the web link noted there. And it's a great wealth of information on prior presentations as well. So whenever you miss something, or if there's something excited you want to share with someone else just direct them there. Thank you, everybody.